Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Karen Weiss in Los Angeles. Karen is the Director of Career and Employer Engagement at Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Business. She's also a professional career coach. Founded on the core values of integrity, stewardship, courage, and compassion, Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Business and Management has been developing values-centered leaders who advance responsible business practices since 1969. It was also recently ranked by Forbes as the number 9 most entrepreneurial university. Karen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And as you know, I'm a graduate of the Pepperdine University's Graduate School, for listeners who might not know that, to disclose that in advance. But Karen, you've been working with students and helping students find jobs for almost 15 years. What is one of the common themes that you see as a challenge that many of the job seekers are facing today?
Well, I think what people really tend to struggle with a lot is the concept of really being able to tell an impactful or great story about how you can add value to an organization or to an employer. What makes you stand out? Why are you the best person for the job? And that's really just all about being able to show how you can add value. Mm-hmm. It's simply not enough to just want to work at a place or think it's their mission or their products or something that resonates with you. You have to be able to show them why you can perform in the job and also add value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, so speaking of sort of job seeking, and I know you're located in Los Angeles. You've got campuses in both LA and in Malibu. How do you think the job market right now is looking in LA as compared to maybe some other cities?
Well, so our campus locations, the students that are at the Malibu campus, as you know, because this is the program you graduated from, they are going to school full time, and when they graduate, potentially they are going to be able to go anywhere. Ironically, what happens is people fall in love with Malibu and they fall in love with Southern California. So a lot of our job seekers from that program really do hope to stay in the LA area or the Southern California area. Mm-hmm. However, right now, and really it's been the story for probably since 2008, 2009, the Southern California job market has been one of the more difficult job markets. There are plenty of jobs, but it's a very tight job market in the sense that employers really hold all the cards. And when it's an employer's market, then they can be picky. They can take their time because there's not a shortage of candidates for the positions that they're hiring for. And for a number of years, the hiring numbers have held pretty constant and haven't really been seeing significant jumps. The Northern California market, though, if we're looking at the West Coast and really the Northern California market and even the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, for example, is a bit more robust, and I think a lot of that is being fueled by the technology companies that are in those areas. So there's a lot of jobs to be had, especially in technology and healthcare, if you're looking on the West Coast. But again, it's still still an employer's market. So mm-hmm. I think the thing that a job seeker needs to look at is if you really are hoping to or need to stay in a specific market that might be a slower job market or a tighter job market, then, you really just need to go through all of the other steps that we're probably going to talk about in a bit to make yourself competitive.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I occasionally will work with job seekers here in Memphis that want to relocate to Los Angeles. And of course, I encourage them to do that. But I do, make sure that they are aware that the market is more competitive. And I think, honestly, sometimes, even though the cost of living is higher, sometimes they are paid a little bit less, just because there are so many candidates there that are qualified. So it's a great area, but I do think you have to mentally be really prepared for what you're getting into.
Yeah, and if you have an idea of how you're adding value, again, it may be, in some cases you may be taking a position to get a foot in the door, but if you can really work to your strengths and give the company an idea of how you can help them, then there's more of a chance to grow with the company.
Sure. So speaking of that, are there certain industries or job functions that you're seeing that are really hot right now, or that graduates are having more success with than others?
Since I'm working with a lot of business school graduates or MBAs in particular, then obviously their goals are generally to transition from whatever they were doing before, even if it was a different functional area or industry, to transition and get into more of those MBA level or graduate business level positions. So still talking about technology, for example, if a person has a computer science undergrad degree coupled with a business degree, then that's a very good combination. Anything that involves technology and business strategy, is really a good combination. And companies in general like a person with a more technical background coupled with an MBA, mm-hmm. because as you know, as an MBA yourself, a lot of it is about really being able to show value financially, be able to understand how you can help a business grow, and as well as to have the tools to drive business decisions and help grow a business. Right. So on the West Coast, I think I kind of mentioned the Seattle area already. Amazon is really hot. Microsoft and even T-Mobile are doing a lot of hiring up in the Seattle area, and they have offices in Southern California too. So with a lot of digital media, many of these companies have Southern California positions where a lot of the digital media is, mm-hmm. and then or maybe sales teams. So often you can head back to your desired state, like California, if you're willing to start out first in where the company is headquartered. Mm-hmm. So we really try to advise students to do that, to think about going, starting their career out of state, and you can always come back to California if that's the end goal.
No, I totally
But I think also, big banks are hiring, healthcare, manufacturing, and really just it's really about kind of some of the less traditional roles are shifting. So, for example, a manufacturing company that might make gardening, landscaping, manure, and such. They might be looking for ways. Maybe their manufacturing capacity is not what's growing, but they're looking for ways to make their company more green. So they're hiring people that have the right background and interest in helping them do things and to lessen their carbon footprint or reduce the carbon footprint. Right. So it's really about companies might be making changes, and do you have things that help them with those changes or those areas of expansion?
Yeah, I agree. And in the case of something like sustainability, you're bringing some kind of uniqueness to the table that company doesn't have today. So I think that's a good point. And I like your point, too, about, moving away to where the company is headquartered. That I left Los Angeles and came to Memphis and did digital marketing for quite a while. And I think for me, doing that, I was able to actually go further in my career and go faster because there was less talent here to pull from. And so I was getting jobs with more responsibility, and I was being exposed to things quicker than if I had been in a market that was more competitive and had more talent in that area. So I think for me, I was able to really grow, my skills. And now if I wanted to move, I have those skills that I can take with me. I think that's just a really good point.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely, it worked for you, and it was the smart thing to do, and I think it really depends what your end goal is. If a person really does want to be a manager, and at a high level and manage, large teams within a big company, obviously, then it's really kind of expected that you're going to have to move several times in your career, because that movement gives you exposure to the company as a whole, and positions you to be a better manager.
Mm-hmm.
But I would probably the advice I would probably give would be to look at industries that really seem to be thriving or booming. For example, healthcare. A person who's interested in being a communications director or a marketing manager, you can follow that interest area, that functional interest area, but just try to apply it to industries that seem to be doing more hiring,
mm-hmm.
and just building the experience that way. There's a lot of stories of students or graduates that I've worked with that went to work for kind of less sexy companies, companies that manufactured kitchen faucets or things of that nature, versus going to maybe a high tech company like a Google or an Apple, and but they went to these companies, had the opportunity to really grow and accelerate their career, and did it with really good training, worked for really great people, and then they really realized at that point that it was more about their love of the function, the marketing function, the finance function, and getting that opportunity to grow, and less about what the industry, kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Just that kind of cachet of the industry, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And people change careers. It's like a mind-boggling number now. People change careers. I think the latest number is like 16 or 17 times, and that's complete careers, not just not jobs or even functions.
Right.
It's just changing completely. And that number probably 15 years ago when I first started was probably more like 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just think with technology and just how fast the world is changing, and just the rate of change is so fast that's how it's playing out for people in terms of their lifespan of their career.
Yeah, it's so different. So speaking of sort of changing careers, I know that you work with a lot of folks, who are, say, fully employed, that are getting their MBA in addition to working at a company. I actually have a couple of clients that I recently started working with who are in an MBA program, and they're actually graduating in about 6 months. And one of their first questions to me was, I want to look for a new job now. Should I look for it now, or should I wait until I officially have the degree in 6 months? What do you say to those folks? I'm sure you've gotten that question before.
Well, I think there are some industries that are very specific in requiring the degree, and there are some types of degrees where you need both a degree and licensing and all of that. But really, a business degree is it's a preferred, in most cases, more than a must-have. I mean, it's certainly a must-have as you move up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at most of the most senior level managers probably have an MBA.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases. So my advice would be that you still, as long as an employer sees that you're working on the degree and that you're it's really actually very impressive to be able to work full time and then also do well in an MBA program and get the degree. So I mean, it still can be something that can be part of that story that you're telling. I'm getting my MBA. because this is what I want to do with it. I will be getting it, next month or in 6 months. But you're a company that I'm interested in, and being able to say why that company and why that position, and how the MBA is just going to really make them an even stronger candidate.
I totally.
In some cases, I think the employer is really looking at, we need somebody now, and they're much more willing to forgive that the person has some classes to take at night than they would be waiting for someone in a full-time MBA program to finish. So
Right.
Often the fully employed programs have a little bit of a leg up when if the company is looking to fill something right away.
Sure, that makes total sense. Well, I also work with a number of clients who, seem to get very nervous with interviewing, and I find that it's especially true for those folks whose native language is not English. They've moved to the U.S. from another country. And I guess for somebody who struggles with that issue, what suggestions do you have for them?
Yeah, that's this is a global economy. I mean, companies are used to, and they really want the diversity. They want people that have lived and worked in other countries. So, they're a little bit forgiving when it comes to, an accent or even nerves. As long as the applicant is really trying to be genuine and be themselves and really engage in a conversation. So it's really, even if it's, you take a moment to say, I'm sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I think employers or hiring managers are much more forgiving of that than if, a person just really is kind of rote and just thinking they have to say certain things to sound like they're the right candidate. So I think it's really not about giving right answers. It's just about listening and being yourself and, just really trying to give that your full effort. I think often it's taking, don't rush your answers. Take an extra moment to think about what you want to say. And, if you're struggling with the right words to express your thoughts clearly, I think, again, that's where you can, take a moment to make that statement, be honest about it. I think it's a world where people really appreciate and understand that diversity and people of different backgrounds is really part of, that's the culture and the hiring landscape that most companies are really trying to achieve.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think so often interviewing is really about getting to know the other person on the other side of the table, and it's less about having the perfect answer. And so it's kind of just about relaxing and just taking the time to be yourself.
Yeah, and if they're asking you for advice, or if they've sought out a career coach, or they're talking to someone about this issue, then they're halfway there. I think it's the people that kind of don't ask for the help, and maybe even because of their culture, they don't want to show that they don't know something, so it's hard for them to ask for the help. And then, that just really can become an obstacle for the interviewer, to really try to figure out where the person's coming from. So you want to be able to help them understand, what you have to offer as much as possible. So I think it's just, asking for help. And we try to do that with the international students as much as we can, really kind of helping understand culturally where they're coming from, but also helping them understand that here's how things work. Here's how things work in the hiring market here, and these are the things that are okay for you to do.
Yeah, I think even in the U.S., we don't think about the fact that hiring practices are very different in different countries. I'm actually going to be going to Europe in a few months, and I think I'm going to be sitting down and doing some podcasts while I'm there to learn more about their hiring culture. Because I find it really fascinating that, just all over the world, this is happening in such a different way. And typically, we're just exposed to what we know, and that's kind of what we think is normal. So, but there are a lot of ways that you can do it.
Absolutely. That's great that you're going to do that.
Yeah, I was there last year and was just totally fascinated by all the companies and, Facebook and Google and everything have opened offices there. So I'm really excited to get back and really immerse myself for a few days in the whole sort of hiring culture there. But when it comes to preparing for an interview, I mean, do you have any basic suggestions that you talk over with the students in terms of how to prepare or what to take with them to an interview?
Well, the key word there is prepare, and you prepare, and you prepare some more, and that's really the thing, is like you cannot leave out all of the important steps, which include the obvious. You need to know your resume cold, so you need to know absolutely what the progression, why the things that you are on your resume are things that you want to be able to talk about with specific information and specific examples of, and if you don't want to talk about it, take it off your resume.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to know your resume cold, and then also at the same time, in equal importance, is knowing the company that you're interviewing with, knowing not just the basics that you can find on their homepage of their website, but this, knowing the knowing their competitors, knowing their products, definitely know their CEO. I mean, I get this a lot, and I'm actually really surprised at how much I've heard this, that a student, not even student, an applicant will come in for an interview and they don't know who the CEO is and of the company. And that might, they might get nervous, they might forget. It's probably because they didn't prepare enough and really, take a deeper dive into looking at the management team and looking at, some key milestones that under that CEO's leadership. And so it's just things like that. And then in the process of doing that preparation, that's where you're going to get your questions that you want to ask. And that's why employers want you to ask questions, because the questions show that you've done the preparation and that you understand who they are and what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think preparation, knowing your resume cold, and just don't forget to come in with some questions to ask. And this seems really basic, but those questions should not be things depending on where you are in the interview process. You don't ask things like, how much vacation time do I get? And, what's how do people dress in the company? Things having to do with your own benefits or the working environment really aren't questions you ask until you're sure that you're going to be, highly considered for the job. So really it's just about showing them that you, number one, you're interested in their company, and you have very specific examples of how you can help them. So, and the other thing too is I think the preparation helps with the nerves. Mm-hmm. If you're more prepared and you really spent the time thinking it through and picturing yourself talking to a person, like you said, it's a conversation, talking to a person about what they do, what the company does, what this role entails, then, and you prepare for that conversation, then I think that can take some of the kind of the jitters you might have out of the scenario.
Yeah. I really like too your suggestion about know your resume cold. I have had a number of clients come to me who had their resume prepared by a resume writer. And as we would go through the resume and I would ask them questions about particular achievements at different jobs, they would say, "Oh, I don't know why it says that. The resume writer did a very bad job."
Oh, no.
And
that's not going to work.
Right. So I really discourage people from hiring someone to write your resume, because you need to really be able to internalize every single detail and know it, backward and forward. And, it's nobody's fault but your own if you don't know what it says.
Yeah. Right. And, the resume, you never stop writing it. So you really have to think about that resume being something that it's a tool you'll use in the interview. It's part of your conversation. So that, you really need to look at it each time you go before each different job. It's not something you just pay someone to write once and then you don't change it. So I actually really enjoy the process of going through a resume with a student or a job seeker and getting them to, think of it that way. Think of, okay, this is like your script. This is your story. And let's talk about the things that are on here. And then you can really see there's certain examples, there's certain things that you're proud of. You get a bigger smile on your face when you're talking about, oh, that was the time that I did such and such, or I was able to, start a new initiative, and you see that people get excited, and those are the perfect examples to give, in an interview. The ones that give you a big smile and help you, really showcase your strengths.
Absolutely. Those are great ideas. On the flip side, I'm sure you must work with students occasionally who really struggle, interviewing. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you really tend to see?
Well, if you talk about the things that I keep, sort of harping on, that really have to do with knowing yourself,
right?
Knowing what you want, what you're good at, the kinds, being able to picture yourself doing a certain amount of work. So that, that's a huge part of it. But, there's also basics that time and time again people kind of disregard, or maybe they've never heard it before. But, there's so many different resources on how to prepare for an interview, or, do's and don'ts. So, it's really easy to find the things you need to do. So if you've done some of these things, if you've done some of the things you shouldn't do, to me it's either pointing to the fact that you didn't take it seriously enough and prepare, or you just, I don't know, just weren't listening when somebody was pointing this out. And these have to do with really simple things like, you show up, be sure you show up 10 to 15 minutes early for the interview, because being late is an absolute no-no. So if you're driving to a new place, if you're somebody who's really, usually late, you just absolutely have to do everything you can to make sure you're there early.
Right.
It's definitely registered when the person that greets you lets the interviewer know, so-and-so is here. That person, I guarantee you, looks at the clock to see what time you got there.
Right.
So that's definitely a must-do. There's a lot of different conversation around, how to dress. It used to be very, very simple. Dark suit, white shirt, whatever. Things have changed a lot. So but there's still kind of the general rule of thumb is to really, no matter what the environment is of the place that you're interviewing for, you need to look like a person who's interviewing. And that means, dressing professionally, wearing a suit or a professional business outfit. Your hair should be neat, it should be clean, all of that. So, you just really need to make sure, appearance-wise, that you don't look like you just rolled out of bed. And that sounds like, okay, really, would somebody show up looking that way? But I've actually heard, people have their own style, personal styles, so I've heard examples where people kind of didn't think they needed to, think about what's appropriate. So definitely do look at that. Every person, this is one that I like to mention because I think it's also one of those ones that can be forgotten or disregarded. So every person you encounter during the interview, no matter who it is, and you should start with the person who might, help you park your car. So every person you encounter during the interview, give them a warm smile and be gracious and be professional. And if you just, use that rule of thumb, no matter who it is, it just really helps you maintain that kind of positive energy throughout the interview. And again, it's noted if you're disrespectful or not gracious to someone that you think you didn't need to be, you'd be surprised how the word will spread.
Right. Absolutely. And I think also your point about dressing appropriately is very important. I actually have a friend from Los Angeles who flew to the East Coast to do a job interview at a company where he was super qualified. It would have been a great fit. and he was used to working for internet companies and startups, and he actually showed up in jeans for his interview on the East Coast, and he was not taken seriously.
Right. It's much more formal there.
Right, right. So it's, really understanding the audience of where you're going to be interviewing. Well, the next
even even on the West Coast, if somebody, and first of all, you can always ask. So if you think it's at all, you're not sure at all, like somebody works there and they dress really casually, you can always ask the person you schedule the interview with. They don't mind telling you. But also, I would still say you would still dress differently than the jeans and the T-shirt.
I think it's always better to be slightly overdressed than slightly underdressed.
Absolutely, yeah. Or just it also is very subtle. Like you can have a really, really great pair of shoes with your jeans, or something that just shows that you took it seriously. And I think it also depends. A more casual, open environment will. They're not going to try to trick you in most cases. So they'll say, this is an informal interview, or we're going to be interviewing. I mean, I know people have been interviewed on bike rides, or high, so it's like if that's the case, they obviously don't expect you to wear a suit, so I think you always expect to wear that professional outfit unless it's discussed otherwise.
Right. Exactly. Well, the next thing I wanted to ask you about is networking and relationship building, and how important is that in the job search process?
Yeah, that's when I was looking at these questions ahead of time, that's the one that I could probably go on for the full length of our conversation or write pages and pages on it. And, the thing is with networking, it's almost getting to the point where that term itself is so overused that this is for, from a student perspective, students are kind of like starting to almost think of it as, why are they telling us to do this instead of helping us get a job? And it's like, well, okay, well, let's just give it a different term then. I mean, it's really about making connections all the way through your job search process. And the more connections you're making, the more you're increasing your chances of connecting with your dream job. So, if you're not building a network or if you're not making contact with people, then, you're really approaching it much more blindly. And so you want to help yourself have a better view of where are the opportunities that I, could be following. And, I just feel like, sometimes, especially in certain industries, it is who you know. So that person that you know doesn't necessarily give you a job or get you the job, but knowing people really does help in the process. It does help in some cases get your resume looked at or get somebody to agree to talk to you on the phone or in person. And, then it's up to you. Then it's definitely up to you. But networking is a way to increase your chances of getting a job or getting the job that you want. For students, it can be laid out a little bit more clear cut. When you're a student, you join clubs, you have interest groups, your career office and your university are constantly organizing activities where you can network. So it's a little bit more clear and laid out for a student, but I think social media, and you know about this, and you're helping people with this all the time. Social media has really changed the game in terms of making it much more accessible for graduates or people that aren't in school to build up a network and make those connections and find ways to have conversations with people. So that's basically the importance is just key.
I agree. And it seems like, too, like your alumni network is also part of that networking picture, I would think. And when you graduate, whether it's from college or graduate school, it's not just completely walking away from all those connections.
Yeah, and I think for people who look at connections as an important part of building up your career and not just getting a job, then it's going to be more apparent to them how networking helped. Because if somebody doesn't really stay in touch with anyone in their class that they graduated with, or they don't go back for any of their school's functions, and then they say, okay, I need a job, I'm going to go to my alumni, you're going to have, it's going to be a slower time to build up those contacts.
Right, exactly. Whereas you could have kind of maintained them, more easily over the years.
Yeah, and I'm just always just so happy and impressed by how helpful alumni are, within Pepperdine, and I know it's the same at many schools, and often it's just you think about how you found out about a job, and you can usually trace it back to 2 or 3 different alumni that kind of were part of that process, or maybe it started with the career office who introduced you to an alum, who then you got to know them, and then you met other people, and then through that you met another person. So sometimes it concludes a whole chain of people that really helped with that particular process. But it's a two-way thing. I mean, it's not just can you help me. It's you finding a way to share common interests, and then developing that rapport.
Sure. Well, so for somebody who doesn't have access to a great career center like the one there at Pepperdine, I mean, what other resources, like websites, do you recommend that they check out, or, just what other resources in general?
Well, there's a lot of people that I talk to that aren't part of Pepperdine. They get asked for a career coaching or advice, and very often, I have to, it makes me realize how much you can get from your school, because everything is sort of disorganized in one place. But all of the resources that the university might provide, all of those resources, are available in the marketplace too. For example, we use tools like InterviewStream and Vault.com in our career office, but those are also resources that any job seeker can use. And InterviewStream is really fun because you can practice interviews. You can put in you can select questions that you want to be asked. You can look at a video recording of yourself, and so those are really great tools. There's so many great online career tools. So you can pretty much find those on your own online, or with the help of someone who navigates the job search process regularly, like a career coach. So I think there's just an endless amount of information out there. Mm-hmm. And for people that like to read, I think it's really, there's a lot of good blogs and good articles, and even just choosing your favorite newspapers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. There's always sections with really good career advice. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the bottom of the article and who writes the article, then you get an idea of who are the people that are giving this advice. And sometimes they're career advisors, and other times they're people that are doing this career coaching as a profession. And so that's a good way to find resources. And then, much like finding a good dentist or hairstylist, just talking to people about how did you go about your job search, and did you use a career coach? And often there are plenty of people who just want to mentor and give advice, because they like to. So, mm-hmm. you can find people to mentor you, and they can help with the process too. So, mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of good tools, and I know you spend time interviewing people that host these sites and provide the blogs, and so I know that you have a lot of good resources too. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think there are just a ton of different resources online. It probably depends a lot how the person, really learns the best. One resource I've seen lately for Pepperdine alums that I really like, and I assume a lot of other schools have this as well, is I've noticed that you all have been offering sort of like webinars, and then those webinars are recorded and are available online later that are about really specific topics, whether it's negotiation or interview skills. And, I think that's really a great resource that's available.
yeah, and LinkedIn. I mean, obviously that's great for the Pepperdine students and alumni for sure, and it's part of our services that we provide. But for people that aren't affiliated with the school, LinkedIn also has great webinars, and or you can connect with organizations that provide webinars, and they're for people that like to physically meet people in person. I mean, there are job search groups that form in local communities,
right?
And just being part of a community, maybe even through a church or through different organizations, you can find ways to connect with people that are going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, so back on the topic of school, I have a number of clients that will come to me, occasionally, and will say, I've decided I want to go back to school. I've had such a hard time finding a job that I really think that going back to school is the answer. And what is your philosophy for those students who their sole purpose of going back to school is finding a job because they've had a hard time in the past?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I really think that if that's the reason, then there's probably another reason behind it, that they weren't happy with what they were doing or struggling to find something. It probably has more to do with the fact that they haven't really figured out what they're good at and what they have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly sometimes the going through an MBA program can be transformative, and you will discover something that you didn't know about before, or that you really can focus in and develop a strength. But that transformation, it's more about I now know what I'm passionate about. I now know what I really want to do. That's the key. The key isn't that you get the degree. The degree itself doesn't get you the job. It's that process of really discovering what you're good at and how you want to build your next career path. So I think for people that come in and say, I hated everything I've been doing before, I totally want to do something different, I haven't been able to get a job, so I'm getting an MBA, then, like it or not, they're still going to have to leverage something from their background. So, it's really just a process of getting to that point where you understand that the MBA doesn't get you that next job. It's you building on your strengths. So,
Right. You still have to get it.
Yeah, and I think consulting is a really great example. Like, many people come to get an MBA and want to go into consulting, and but they want to consult in an area that they haven't yet really been involved in, right? But they think, well, I have an MBA, so I'm going to consult, and very often they get hired by a firm because of what they were doing before.
Oh, right.
So so maybe you were an accountant before, and you get hired by an accounting firm, and eventually maybe you can switch over to do management consulting, but your area of expertise or the way you can help them with their clients is based on what you know how to do. So I think there's always exceptions. I mean, people do get hired in any job market, even a competitive one, with very little work experience, and an MBA in hand, because they are able to really show their their level of potential, and some companies may be hiring that person based on their potential. But again, I don't think you show your potential without having an extremely strong sense of who you are and what you're really good at. So that's just a huge part of it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, you kind of land that next job and you're being hired on potential. Once you're there, what are a few keys to success, to keep you there and actually help you thrive in that new job?
This probably sounds really simple, but I think people in any role or any level who are, really try to be a positive example to others, whatever they're doing. Whether it's to your colleagues, to people outside of your immediate department, to customers, just really, if you're a positive example, then you're going to be, you're going to build. It's really about building your brand. You're going to build that brand of being knowledgeable, of being, somebody that somebody wants to work with or get advice from. And I think if you if you have that attitude and you treat people with respect, then you are, I think that's a huge key. I think also that people need to always be hungry and wanting to learn more. So I think if you're doing both of those things, you're going to really help drive your own success. And that means don't be afraid to take on a responsibility or a project because you haven't done something before. So I think again, it all comes back kind of to the same concept of if you really know yourself and you're confident in your abilities, then you stick with that, then that kind of drives you throughout your career. So if you're given a chance to do something and you get a little apprehensive, it's like, well, I haven't done that before, but I've been successful in the past doing things that are new or unfamiliar. So, I think if you have that confidence, that pays dividends throughout your career.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I think just being genuine, don't be afraid to ask people for advice and ideas and insights. I think if people are flexible too, so you just are open and flexible and willing to kind of talk to people about your goals and your ideas, you'd be amazed at how willing people are to help and mentor. And it just really is part of that. It goes back to networking. It goes back to people get jobs through not just what they know, but who they connect with, who they share their dreams and their goals with. And if you're willing to do that, and I understanding that not everybody is an extrovert or not everybody is maybe as comfortable doing that, but I think if you just put yourself in the position to engage with people throughout your career, it's going to help you tremendously.
Oh, yes. I definitely agree. Well, so if any of our listeners today are interested to learn more about the MBA program at Pepperdine, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
The best way is to start out by navigating the web page, which is bschool.pepperdine.edu, and that at that starting point, you can kind of look at whatever program you might be interested in at the graduate business level, whether it's an MBA or a master's in global business or whatever it might be. You can identify the program, and then from there, it will be clear how to make contact with the right people.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining me. The discussion today has been very helpful, and thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.